What's up, guys? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of our videos. Also, make sure you follow us all over social media so you don't miss any of our content or show announcements. Next question. This is in regards to the Warriors' 11-man rotation. Part of that also is helped by playing 12 guys because, like ice hockey, you need more shifts of bodies to constantly push at that pace. It's a huge edge. And Steph is as an offensive engine. It's a typo here. Steph is an offensive engine that makes all 11 of those guys playable in high-efficiency offense. And Raymond, as an enhancer, allows them to play against Draymond, as an enhancer, allows them to play against big lineups. This makes perfect sense to me, and this is something that I've been kind of keyed in on a little bit. I think it's delicate because a lot of it depends on how many good basketball players you have, right? Like, if the Lakers, for instance, started running an 11-man rotation, it could get a little tricky with some of the guys that they have at the tail end of their rotation right now, right? But the flip side of that is, like, when you play this style, the style that the Warriors play, heavy transition both ways. That's the thing. Like, the Warriors, as of like 2 nights ago, the last time I checked, had the best transition defense in the league per cleaning the glasses, defensive points added per 100 possessions metric, right? So, like, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of sprinting back in transition and, like, making sure that you're flying around in the open floor. What they do in offense in transition, the way they run around. I had a play that I put in Timpf's tape earlier on Thursday where you guys got to see, like, how quickly they run in the half court when they're trying to run their action. So, like, it's one of those things where if you have 11 good basketball players, it does make sense to me that you would go with a bigger rotation in the regular season. Ice hockey's a great comp. It's the line shifts and the fact that your best player might only play 22, 25 minutes a game because he's just because skating is so damn hard in terms of the cardio, right? And, like, that's the thing, like, playing this brand of basketball, and it extends to the half court too, with all the ground that you have to cover in rotation, closing out at great 3-point shooters that are spotting up 25 feet from the basket, right? So, like, yeah, I'm actually kind of into this concept. Like, the Lakers run a 9-man rotation, but they play at a slower pace, and they've got some guys that are a little bit more lethargic. But, like, I'm with you. I think if you've got 10, 11 good basketball players, you should run a longer rotation. Warriors fan. I'm grateful to Kerr for the last decade, but I'm also pissed at the way he's handling our next generation. Why is Lindy Waters getting more playing time than Moody and Jonathan Kuminga? It feels like 2 years ago when Ty Jerome and Jeremy Lamb got playing time over Moody and Jonathan Kuminga. I don't mean to hate on Waters. I love having him, but I'm more interested in seeing what Moody can do. And the last time JK played crunch time, he won the game in overtime against the Rockets. So this is one of those things where after all these years watching Steve Kerr, we just have to understand his philosophy as a basketball coach. Everyone wants to cling to this narrative that, like, Steve Kerr hates Jason Tatum because they beat him by 50 in a regular season game last year, or because of what happened in the NBA Finals in 2022 or something like that. And it's like, actually, the reason why Steve Kerr played Derek White and Drew Holiday over Jason Tatum is he kind of looks at the guard position in his offense as a quick read and react player that has to be able to shoot on the move. And if you remember, Jason Tatum was not shooting the ball well at the time, and Jason Tatum isn't exactly a movement shooter either. He's a kind of more of an ISO shooter. Like, he's a guy that you kind of want initiating the offense, right? And the Olympic team, they'd already decided they were going to be running through LeBron at the top of the key, and they needed players that were going to be more running in that action in that Steve Kerr system, right? This is the same thing that's been happening with the Warriors forever. It's like, oh, Brandon Pajemski's getting all these minutes. Like, all these guards are getting all these minutes while Moody is not getting as much, or Jonathan Kuminga's minutes are less consistent. And that's all it is. Steve Kerr trusts Lindy Waters to be a threat off the move as a shooter and to make decisions coming off of those actions at a higher level than Moses Moody. Now, Moses Moody, to me, is a very good player that just kind of is a little bit of a clunky fit in the Warriors system, in the sense that he's a good physical perimeter defender with size, which is like, there's a lot of value there. And I actually think he's a pretty solid shooter when he can get his feet set and he's open. He's worked hard as a movement shooter. He's a better movement shooter than he was a couple of years ago. He's a better movement shooter than a lot of the guys that have come through other development programs around the NBA, right? But specifically within the Warriors offense, Lindy Waters is a better movement shooter who is a better decision maker in the decision zone, which is like you come off the screen, you have to immediately read the screen defender. He's too far back, my guy's caught on the screen, I'm shooting this thing. He's too far back and my guy's trailing, but he's not completely attached. I want to methodically work down into the lane and see if I can't warp the defense a little bit. Once I get in there, the decision zone around that elbow, I need to make quick reads based on what the help defense is doing. And like Steve Kerr has traditionally trusted players that are better in read and react situations in those rotation minutes. And guards tend to be better read and react players because they've been handling the ball since they were younger. But like, that's the thing is like, I think Kuminga still gets his opportunities and he's playing in this bench role where he gets to come in and be more aggressive. But like, I don't think it's like any sort of personal vendetta or like philosophy involving wanting to be small. I think it's literally just about that read and react decision making and Steve Kerr trusting some of his guards over the years more than he's trusted some of his forwards. Last Warriors question, and then we'll move on. DeAnthony Melton being out for the season is a tough blow for the Dubs, as he was the perfect off guard to Steph and their only real two-way small perimeter player. What should they do to make up for it? Regarding their front court and secondary production issues, do you think there are any realistic chance that the Heat would part ways with Bam? And if so, could they get him without completely gutting their roster? I think he'd be a much better fit than someone like Giannis, and his contract is more modest too. So obviously bad news about DeAnthony Melton. I'm just as bummed for him as I am for the Warriors, just because that guy's just had a nightmare stretch of injury luck over the last couple of years. But I'm not as concerned about it in their rotation because, yeah, you're right. DeAnthony Melton might have been the best two-way guard next to Steph, maybe, in terms of like his defensive ability and his ability to shoot and make plays in action. But you're so deep at the guard that I just am not worried about it. There's just so many other guys that can do that job. It's really the front court that where I think that they could use a real like talent upgrade. Bam would be a dream, like literally a dream fit. But I just think he's going to be way too expensive. And I also doubt that Miami moves him in a rebuild. Like, to me, if Miami continues to spiral, and they're not doing that bad, they're 6-7, and Eric Spoelstra botched a game where they could easily be above 500 right now in an Eastern Conference that doesn't have many above 500 teams. But let's say that they keep spiraling. I think even if the Heat looked to rebuild, they would still rebuild around Bam. He kind of feels like the heart and soul of the franchise in a lot of ways. He plays a very specific position that is an anchor on both ends, which is like he's the guy that can anchor a defense at the 5 spot as a drop big and a switch big and a rebounder. And then on the other end of the floor, he's kind of like the quintessential 5-out big in the sense that he's really good at dribble handoff action at the top of the key. So like even with his offensive limitations, he's still a really good fulcrum on the offensive end, and he's a defensive anchor, and he's at the right age. Still has a lot of good basketball left. Have a hard time believing that they're going to move on from Bam. I also think that they're kind of betting that Bam's development as a shooter in the long run, and a guy like Kel'el Ware is like a stretch 5 next to him, that they might be able to play him at the 4 and have a bigger front line. So I don't think Bam is the option. Now, I talked about Jimmy Butler a little bit yesterday, and I had some Warriors fans complain like, oh, you can't give up Andrew Wiggins for Jimmy Butler. And for the record, I don't think you should do it unless you have to. Like, if you have the opportunity to get a guy like Jimmy Butler without including Andrew Wiggins, you do it 10 times out of 10. I mean, imagine a lineup with Steph Curry and, I think you could maybe even consider getting away with a Buddy Hield in that lineup if you have Jimmy and Andrew at the 3-4 next to Draymond. But like there's a version of it where the Warriors just ask for Andrew Wiggins if you want to make that deal. Now, the reason why I said I would consider it, let's dig a little bit deeper. One, the Warriors have been going big in the starting lineup anyway, so there's kind of like this one spot for a forward, which is at the 3 with Andrew Wiggins, right? And in the event that you have to flip a Wiggins for a Jimmy Butler, you still have Jonathan Kuminga for when you go small, right? You can imagine a Jimmy, Jonathan, Draymond type of look with Draymond at the 5, right? But I'm not saying you flip Andrew Wiggins for Jimmy Butler right now. The Warriors are a trade at the deadline type of team. Why? Because there's no version of this where they're desperate. Yeah, if the perfect deal fell into their lap right now, I would expect them to jump on it, but that's not how teams trade usually. Teams usually want to wait till the deadline because they want to weaponize the market, right? They want to get multiple teams bidding to drive up the price, right? That's how that works. So when we get to February, you make a call at that point. We're going to know a lot in February. we're going to know that Andrew Wiggins is either having a flashback season like 2022 or he's more or less the same player that he was last year, right? Like we have this like roughly, I can't remember how many games the Warriors have played, maybe 15 at this point. So you have like a roughly 15 game sample. It's a small sample still. But like when we get to late January, we're going to know like Wiggins is back. We're in good shape. All right, let's do this. We're also going to know where Jimmy Butler's at. He's been kind of rough to start this year, right? But like we'll have a better idea of where Jimmy Butler's at in mid-January. So let's just paint a picture here for a second. Let's pretend that Jimmy Butler looks great in mid-January. Like really starting to get his legs back underneath him. He looks great. He looks healthy. He looks ready to go. Let's say that the Heat are still floundering in the play-in area around like the 7-8 seed. Okay. And the Heat front office looks at the situation and they go, we can't beat Boston. Maybe they get their butts kicked by Cleveland at some time around that time too. And so then the Heat start to have some serious conversations and they're like, okay, our best pathway to kind of resetting here is why don't we make a deal with Jimmy? And let's say that the Warriors can pull it off. And for the record, forget about Andrew Wiggins for a second. Let's just set him aside. Let's just say that the Warriors are able to make the deal even without Andrew. But let's just say that they're able to get Jimmy Butler. Okay? All I want you to think about is a big playoff game. Okay? Don't think about the regular season. As I talked about, as soon as they got those 2 wins against the Pelicans when Steph was out, I was all in on this team as a regular season wins juggernaut. They're going to win a lot of regular season games because they're deep, they're fast, they're well coached. They've got great leadership on the court with Steph and Draymond. They're just going to win a lot of regular season games. Okay? So we get to mid-January. You already know you're going to be a home court team in the first round, or more or less that's the trajectory you're on. Now just think about a big playoff series. I want you to think about a second round series against the Dallas Mavericks. They've got it together. The Dallas Mavericks are cooking with their system with Clay. Luka's got his legs underneath him. Kyrie's hooping. And it's a 2-2 series. And you're going into Golden State for a pivotal game 5. Or, hell, you're in a road game, whatever it is. Big playoff game, big moment. I'd want Jimmy Butler out there with Steph. You get into those games, and everyone's uncomfortable. And everything's a rock fight. And everything's nasty. And having a big, strong forward who has an alpha dog mentality, who is highly versatile on both ends of the floor. A savage competitor that's going to bring it. You just know he's going to bring it. A true foxhole guy that competitively will match Steph in those moments. That could be the difference between you getting the trophy and not getting the trophy. Flat out. So, like, I get it. Wiggins looks great. Jimmy looks old. If they both looked this way in February, no way I'm making that deal. I'm just saying you make the call when you get to February. And if you get to February and you look like a really good regular season team that just lacks some top-end firepower, and a certain type of player becomes available, in this case, talking about a Jimmy Butler, I do think you've got to make that deal. Because that's the type of deal that gives you the guy that you need next to Steph, next to Draymond, that can be a foxhole guy in that big moment. And he's I wouldn't trade Wiggins for any other guy. I wouldn't trade Wiggins for, I don't think Brandon Ingram is the guy that's good enough for a Wiggins deal. I don't think Levine is good enough for a Wiggins deal with the way he's playing right now. But Jimmy's the one guy where I'm like, we have routinely seen this guy when he is healthy in a playoff series. He is regularly outplayed players that are viewed as above him in the NBA hierarchy. I just would want him. I'd want him in the battle with me if I had an opportunity to have him in that situation.